They were the rising flames of Hollywood, stars destined to burn for decades, not moments. But fate rewrote their stories long before the world was ready to let them go. Their talent was undeniable, their futures limitless, yet their lives ended at the very edge of brilliance. This is the journey into the lives of Hollywood actors who died far too young, leaving behind a silence that still echoes through time. Number 1. James Dean. He was the portrait of youthful rebellion, a symbol of raw emotion in an era desperate for authenticity. Born in the quiet fields of Indiana, James Dean carried a storm within him, a restless spirit that Hollywood recognized the moment he stepped in front of a camera. His performance in East of Eden earned him his first Oscar nomination and marked him as a rising force. But it was Rebel Without a Cause that transformed him into something larger than life, a cultural icon for every young soul searching for meaning, anger, and identity. Behind the fame, Dean lived with a hunger that pushed him beyond the screen. He found his escape not in Hollywood glamour, but in the thrill of racing, where speed felt like freedom and danger seemed distant. In 1955, he bought the silver Porsche Spyder that would become a grim symbol of his destiny. Friends pleaded with him to slow down, mechanics warned him the car felt cursed, but Dean only flashed that boyish smile and brushed off every concern. 24 years old, fearless, brilliant, untouchable, or so it seemed. On September 30th, 1955, as he drove toward a racing event in Salinas, fate struck with brutal swiftness. Another car crossed his path, and the collision shattered the silence of the California highway. James Dean died within minutes, leaving behind only 3 major films, yet they were enough to carve his legacy into the foundation of American cinema. He became the definition of a life interrupted, a promise that Hollywood never got the chance to see fulfilled. Number 2. River Phoenix. He was the kind of talent Hollywood sees once in a generation, a young actor whose presence felt honest, wounded, and impossibly real. Born in a struggling family that wandered from place to place, River Phoenix carried a sensitivity shaped by hardship and a wisdom far beyond his years. When he appeared in Stand By Me, audiences immediately felt the depth behind his eyes, the quiet pain, the compassion, the truth. By the late 1980s, critics were calling him the next great actor of his era, a future legend in the making. River never chased fame. He cared little for Hollywood's glitter, preferring music, activism, and intimate roles that allowed him to speak to the world rather than perform for it. His Oscar-nominated turn in Running on Empty confirmed what many already believed. River Phoenix was not simply gifted, he was transformative. Directors admired him, actors looked up to him, and fans felt connected to a soul who seemed too pure for the world he lived in. But behind that gentle exterior, River carried battles he rarely spoke about. Pressures mounted, expectations grew, and the weight of being a young genius began to erode the fragile balance he fought to maintain. On the night of October 31st, 1993, he stepped into the Viper Room in Los Angeles, a club partly owned by Johnny Depp, intending only to relax with friends and family. Instead, the night spiraled into tragedy. A sudden collapse on the sidewalk, frantic attempts to save him, and a young life slipping away before help could arrive. River Phoenix was only 23 years old when the world lost him. His death sent shockwaves through Hollywood, a reminder that brilliance often burns too brightly, too fast. Even with just a handful of films, he left behind a legacy of honesty and emotional truth that still influences young actors today. He was the star who never sought the spotlight, yet became unforgettable. Number 2. River Phoenix. He was the kind of talent Hollywood sees once in a generation, a young actor whose presence felt honest, wounded, and impossibly real. Born in a struggling family that wandered from place to place, River Phoenix carried a sensitivity shaped by hardship and a wisdom far beyond his years. When he appeared in Stand By Me, audiences immediately felt the depth behind his eyes, the quiet pain, the compassion, the truth. By the late 1980s, critics were calling him the next great actor of his era, a future legend in the making. River never chased fame. He cared little for Hollywood's glitter, preferring music, activism, and intimate roles that allowed him to speak to the world rather than perform for it. His Oscar-nominated turn in Running on Empty confirmed what many already believed. River Phoenix was not simply gifted, he was transformative. Directors admired him, actors looked up to him, and fans felt connected to a soul who seemed too pure for the world he lived in. But behind that gentle exterior, River carried battles he rarely spoke about. Pressures mounted, expectations grew, and the weight of being a young genius began to erode the fragile balance he fought to maintain. On the night of October 31, 1993, he stepped into the Viper Room in Los Angeles, a club partly owned by Johnny Depp, intending only to relax with friends and family. Instead, the night spiraled into tragedy. A sudden collapse on the sidewalk, frantic attempts to save him, and a young life slipping away before help could arrive. River Phoenix was only 23 years old when the world lost him. His death sent shockwaves through Hollywood, a reminder that brilliance often burns too brightly, too fast. Even with just a handful of films, he left behind a legacy of honesty and emotional truth that still influences young actors today. He was the star who never sought the spotlight, yet became unforgettable. Number 3. Heath Ledger. He was the kind of actor who transformed every role into something hauntingly alive, a performer who dissolved into his characters with a commitment that bordered on frightening. Born in Perth, Australia, Heath Ledger carried a quiet determination from childhood, a belief that he was meant for something greater. When he arrived in Hollywood, casting directors immediately sensed his raw magnetism. From 10 Things I Hate About You to A Knight's Tale, he showed charm and range, but it was only the surface of what he was capable of. As the years passed, Ledger chased roles that challenged him, characters that demanded pieces of his soul. His performance in Brokeback Mountain earned him worldwide acclaim, not because it was shocking, but because it was honest, delicate, and profoundly human. Critics saw in him the arrival of a true artist, one who wasn't afraid to break himself open on camera. And then came the role that would change everything: the Joker. He committed himself fully, shutting himself away for weeks, filling notebooks with chaotic thoughts, twisting his own mind to understand the psychology of a man consumed by madness. When The Dark Knight was released, audiences were stunned. His Joker wasn't just a villain, he was a terrifying reflection of chaos, a performance so intense it felt almost dangerous. Awards followed, praise poured in, yet behind the triumph was a young man struggling with insomnia, anxiety, and the emotional toll of his own brilliance. On January 22, 2008, Heath Ledger was found unresponsive in his New York apartment. The news spread with a numb disbelief, a star at the height of his power, gone at 28. The official cause? An accidental overdose of prescription medications he relied on to quiet his racing mind and restless nights. His death left an ache in Hollywood, a void where a future legend should have stood. The Joker earned him a posthumous Academy Award, but the honor carried a sadness deeper than celebration. Heath Ledger was more than a role, more than a phenomenon. He was a once-in-a-lifetime talent, taken long before he could finish writing his story. Yet through every frame he left behind, his spirit continues to burn, wild, brilliant, unforgettable. Number 5. Sharon Tate. She was beauty in its purest form, a rising star whose gentleness radiated through every role she touched. Born in Texas and raised across military bases around the world, Sharon Tate grew up shy, soft-spoken, and unaware of the extraordinary presence she carried. When she finally stepped into Hollywood, photographers, directors, and audiences all reacted the same way, with stunned admiration. She wasn't just another actress, she was a symbol of the new, dreamlike spirit of late 1960s cinema. Her early roles in Eye of the Devil and The Fearless Vampire Killers revealed an innocence balanced with surprising emotional depth. Critics saw potential. Producers saw a future leading lady. But those who knew her best saw something rarer, a kindness untouched by the harshness of the industry. When she married director Roman Polanski, the two became Hollywood's golden couple, young, glamorous, artistic, and seemingly invincible. Sharon was on the edge of her true breakthrough, carrying her first child, glowing with excitement for the life she was about to begin. But the summer of 1969 would become one of the darkest moments in American history. On the night of August 8th, the Manson family invaded her home in the Hollywood Hills. What happened inside those walls was so brutal, so senseless, that it changed the cultural landscape of the entire country. Sharon Tate, 8.5 months pregnant, was killed at just 26 years old. The news sent shockwaves across the world. A young actress full of hope and tenderness, taken by a horror no one could comprehend. Her death became a symbol, not of fame, but of innocence destroyed. Hollywood's golden age dimmed overnight. People locked their doors, guarded their lives, and realized that even the brightest stars were not untouchable. Sharon Tate's legacy, however, is not defined by that night. It lives in her warmth, in the kindness everyone remembered, and in the promise of a career that should have lasted decades. She remains frozen in time, forever young, forever luminous, forever one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking what-ifs. Number 6. Paul Walker. He was the effortless charm of early 2000s Hollywood, a blue-eyed, sun-kissed actor who carried the spirit of California in every smile. Born in Glendale and raised near the ocean he loved so dearly, Paul Walker seemed destined to live a life built around speed, waves, and wide-open skies. Hollywood found him young, first in commercials, then in supporting roles, but it wasn't until The Fast and the Furious that everything changed. Overnight, he became the face of a franchise that would redefine action cinema for an entire generation. As Brian O'Connor, Paul brought something unexpected: warmth, honesty, and an emotional core that grounded the high-octane world around him. Fans didn't just watch him, they trusted him. Behind the scenes, co-stars described him as humble and gentle, a man who preferred quiet barbecues over red carpets, surfing at dawn rather than Hollywood nightlife. Fame never changed him. If anything, he spent more time helping others, especially through his disaster relief charity, Reach Out Worldwide. But speed was woven into his life long before the movies. Cars were his passion, his escape, his connection to family and friends. On November 30th, 2013, Paul attended a charity event in Santa Clarita. He got into a Porsche Carrera GT with his close friend Roger Rodas, neither man knowing it would be the last ride they ever took. Moments later, the car lost control, struck a tree, and burst into flames. The news shattered fans across the world. Paul Walker, the man whose on-screen life revolved around motion, was gone at 40. Production on the 7th Fast and Furious film paused. Cast members mourned not just a co-star, but a brother. Tributes poured in from around the world, from those he inspired, from those he helped, from those who saw in him a kindness rare in Hollywood. The final scene of Furious 7 became a farewell that millions felt in their hearts, a drive into the sunset, a promise that he would be remembered always. Paul Walker's legacy is one of compassion, humility, and passion. He lived fast, yes, but he also lived generously. And though his journey ended far too soon, the impact of his presence still races on. Number 7. Bruce Lee. He was more than an actor. He was a force of nature, a man who reshaped the boundaries of cinema, philosophy, and physical potential. Born in San Francisco, but raised in the crowded streets of Hong Kong, Bruce Lee discovered early that movement was his language, discipline his foundation, and self-expression his destiny. When he returned to America in his late teens, he carried with him a mastery of martial arts unlike anything Hollywood had ever seen. Bruce entered the industry not as a star, but as a revelation. His role as Kato in The Green Hornet electrified audiences and introduced a speed, sharpness, and authenticity that made traditional fight choreography look lifeless by comparison. Yet Hollywood, blinded by prejudice, struggled to see him as a leading man. So he went back to Hong Kong, and there, the legend truly began. Films like The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon turned him into a global phenomenon. Every punch, every glare, every movement felt like lightning captured on screen. It wasn't acting, it was truth. When Warner Bros. Finally agreed to produce Enter the Dragon, Bruce stood on the edge of worldwide superstardom. He had created his own martial arts philosophy, Jeet Kune Do. He trained athletes, actors, and fighters. He wrote, taught, and inspired. For millions, he wasn't just an action hero. He was empowerment, discipline, and confidence made human. But even the brightest flames cast fragile shadows. On July 20th, 1973, during a break from work in Hong Kong, Bruce Lee collapsed after complaining of headaches. He never regained consciousness. The official cause was cerebral edema, a swelling of the brain, a sudden, devastating end to a man who seemed unstoppable. He was only 32. His death shook the world, sparking rumors, theories, and endless questions from fans who couldn't accept that someone so powerful could vanish so quickly. Bruce Lee left behind a legacy unmatched in its impact. He shattered stereotypes, redefined action cinema, and inspired millions to believe in their own strength. His time was short, but his influence is infinite. He didn't just change movies, he changed the world. Number 8. Brandon Lee. He was the heir to a legend, yet determined to carve a legacy entirely his own. Born in Oakland to Bruce Lee and Linda Lee Cadwell, Brandon Lee grew up in the long shadow of a father the world worshipped. But behind the last name was a young man with immense talent, gentle humor, and a quiet determination to be seen for who he truly was, not just as Bruce Lee's son, but as an actor worthy of his own place in Hollywood. Brandon trained in martial arts from childhood, but his heart was drawn to storytelling. He studied acting, pushed himself through small roles, and fought hard for opportunities that weren't handed to him. Hollywood didn't know what to do with him at first. Some studios wanted a copy of Bruce. Brandon refused. He wanted depth, emotion, characters with wounds and complexity. His breakthrough came when he was cast as Eric Draven in The Crow, a dark, poetic role that demanded raw intensity and emotional vulnerability. It was the kind of performance that could redefine a career. On set, Brandon was gracious, hard-working, and fully immersed in the character of a man returned from death seeking justice. Those who worked with him spoke of his incredible focus, his warmth, and the sense that he was on the edge of something enormous, a career poised to explode into global stardom. But fate intervened in the most tragic way. On March 31, 1993, during the filming of a scene involving a prop gun, a fatal error occurred. A fragment lodged inside the barrel was discharged with deadly force. Brandon fell, at first believed to be acting, then the horror became real. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought for hours to save him, but he passed away at only 28 years old. His death devastated Hollywood. It echoed the loss of his father, creating a heartbreaking parallel between two lives cut short just as they were beginning to bloom. Fans mourned not only the man he was, but the future denied to him, the roles he never played, the stories he never told. Brandon Lee's performance in The Crow remains one of the most hauntingly beautiful in modern cinema, a final testament to a talent the world barely had the chance to know. He once said, "The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering." In the end, he did exactly that. Number 9. Marilyn Monroe. Parce 9. She was the face of American glamour, a symbol of beauty and desire whose image became bigger than the woman herself. Born Norma Jean Mortensen in Los Angeles, Marilyn Monroe grew up moving between orphanages and foster homes, searching for stability that always seemed just out of reach. But within her was a resilience shaped by hardship, a quiet strength that pushed her toward the spotlight long before she ever understood its cost. When she first appeared on magazine covers and film screens, Hollywood saw only the surface: the platinum hair, the breathy voice, the effortless allure. But beneath that iconic smile was an actress desperate to be taken seriously. She studied relentlessly, fought for better roles, and delivered performances that revealed intelligence and emotional depth far beyond the blonde bombshell label she was trapped in. In films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot, she lit up the screen with a charm no one could imitate. Yet behind the charisma lived a woman who carried loneliness like a second skin. Fame surrounded her but never protected her. The pressure to remain perfect, the relentless intrusion of the press, and the instability of her personal relationships slowly eroded her sense of peace. Friends described her as tender, thoughtful, and deeply sensitive, qualities few ever saw behind the public persona that the world expected her to maintain. The studios loved the myth of Marilyn Monroe, but the woman behind that myth struggled to hold herself together. On August 5, 1962, Marilyn was found unresponsive in her Brentwood home. The official cause was ruled as an overdose, a tragic end to years of emotional turmoil and overwhelming expectations. She was only 36. Her death shocked not just Hollywood, but the entire world. The loss felt like the dimming of a cultural star that had burned impossibly bright, yet far too briefly. Marilyn Monroe remains a haunting paradox. Adored, yet misunderstood. Powerful, yet fragile. Immortal, yet heartbreakingly human. She left behind not just beauty, but a story of vulnerability, longing, and a dreamer swallowed by the weight of her own legend. Even today, her presence lingers, in photographs, in films, and in the aching question of what she might have become if the world had been kinder.
Number 10. Anton Yelchin. He was one of the most gifted young actors of his generation, a quiet prodigy whose work carried a sincerity rare even among seasoned performers. Born in Leningrad to two world-class figure skaters, Anton Yelchin arrived in the United States as an infant, growing up in California with a curiosity that touched every corner of his life: music, photography, philosophy, and, most of all, acting. By the time he reached his teens, Hollywood already recognized the depth of his talent. Anton never acted for fame. He acted because he loved stories, their sadness, their chaos, their honesty. His performances in films like Alpha Dog, Like Crazy, and Green Room showcased a range that felt raw and unfiltered. When he stepped into the role of Chekhov in the Star Trek reboot, fans embraced him instantly. He brought humor, charm, and humanity to a beloved character, proving that even in massive franchises, he could hold the screen with effortless authenticity. Directors praised his intellect. Co-stars admired his humility. Audiences felt an almost immediate connection to him. Away from the spotlight, Anton was gentle, introspective, and endlessly creative. He played guitar in a punk band, wrote poetry, filled notebooks with ideas, and photographed the world with a quiet, observant eye. There was no ego, no Hollywood veneer, just a young man driven by passion and limitless potential. No one imagined that his life would end in a way so sudden, so unlikely, so heartbreaking. On June 19, 2016, Anton was preparing for a rehearsal when a freak accident occurred at his home. His Jeep, affected by a known mechanical issue, rolled backward down his driveway, pinning him against a brick pillar. When friends discovered him hours later, it was too late. He was only 27. The shock was overwhelming. A brilliant talent taken not by illness or reckless behavior, but by a mechanical failure that defied comprehension. Hollywood mourned him with an ache that was almost physical. Tributes came from actors, filmmakers, musicians, every corner of the industry he had touched with his kindness and quiet brilliance. His parents, devastated yet determined to honor him, later created a documentary celebrating his life, revealing the depth of a soul far older than the years he lived. Anton Yelchin's legacy is one of honesty, artistry, and extraordinary promise. He was a rare light, gentle, thoughtful, endlessly creative, extinguished far too soon. And for those who admired him, the tragedy lies not only in his passing, but in the countless stories he never got to tell. Number 11. Chadwick Boseman was dignity personified. A man whose presence carried the weight of history long before the world understood the battles he was fighting. Born in South Carolina and shaped by the culture, faith, and quiet strength of his community, Chadwick Boseman grew up with a deep love for storytelling. He studied writing, directing, and acting with equal devotion, determined to use art not for fame, but for meaning. Hollywood would soon discover just how powerful that purpose could be. Chadwick's rise was not sudden, but steady, built on roles that honored real lives and real legacies. As Jackie Robinson in 42, he captured defiance wrapped in grace. As James Brown in Get On Up, he became pure fire, rhythm, and genius. As Thurgood Marshall, he embodied intelligence and resolve. Every performance had weight, intention, respect. Directors admired his discipline. Fellow actors admired his humility. Audiences admired everything. Then came Black Panther. As King T'Challa, Chadwick Boseman became a global icon, a hero for children, a symbol of pride, and a cultural milestone for millions. The world saw strength, elegance, and nobility. What no one saw was the truth behind the scenes. He was filming some of the most physically demanding roles of his career while quietly battling stage 3 colon cancer. He visited children in oncology wards, encouraged young actors, trained for months at a time, and stood on red carpets with a smile that hid unimaginable pain. Even those closest to him were unaware of the fight he waged every day. He carried it alone, not out of secrecy, but out of love, refusing to let his illness overshadow the stories he believed so deeply in. On August 28, 2020, the world received the news it was least prepared for. Chadwick Boseman had passed away at 43. The shock was immediate, heartbreaking, and universal. Fans mourned a hero. Colleagues mourned a brother. An entire generation mourned a man who had shown them what it meant to lead with purpose, courage, and quiet power. His legacy is extraordinary not only because of the roles he played, but because of the man he was: humble, devoted, and unshakably principled. Chadwick Boseman proved that true greatness is not measured in years lived, but in the lives touched, the barriers broken, and the dignity carried. Number 12. Cory Monteith. He was the unexpected star, the actor who came from the shadows of personal struggle to become a symbol of hope for millions. Born in Calgary, Cory Monteith grew up far from the bright lights of Hollywood. His teenage years were turbulent, marked by hardship, instability, and a battle with addiction that began long before he ever stepped in front of a camera. But beneath that chaos was a gentle soul, a natural warmth that made people feel safe, understood, and seen. Acting found him almost by accident. After years of searching for direction, he began auditioning, taking small roles that allowed him to express the emotion he had carried for so long. And then came Glee. When Cory stepped into the role of Finn Hudson, the kind-hearted quarterback with a big heart and bigger dreams, everything changed. He became a global sensation almost overnight. Fans adored him. Co-stars praised his kindness. His vulnerability on screen felt honest because it was real, shaped by the pain and resilience of his own life. Despite fame, Cory never pretended to be perfect. He spoke openly about his struggles, encouraging young people to seek help, to believe in second chances. But recovery is not a straight path, and the pressure of sudden worldwide attention added weight to a burden he had carried since childhood. Those close to him described a man who tried with all his heart, generous, caring, deeply empathetic, yet still fighting a battle that never fully loosened its grip. On July 13, 2013, Corey was found unresponsive in a Vancouver hotel room. The news broke with a sadness that felt heavy across the world. He was only 31. The official cause, a relapse, a mixture of heroin and alcohol, was a devastating reminder of how unforgiving addiction can be, even for someone surrounded by love, support, and success. Hollywood mourned him not as a superstar, but as a gentle soul who brought joy wherever he went. Fans gathered to honor him. His co-stars spoke of his laughter, his humility, his ability to make anyone feel like they mattered. Corey Monteith's story is not defined by the way he died, but by the hope he gave others. Proof that even those who struggle can still shine beautifully. Number 13. Judy Garland. She was the voice of innocence, the girl who followed a yellow brick road into cinematic immortality. Yet behind the curtain, Judy Garland lived a life marked by pressure no child should ever endure. Born Frances Ethel Gum in Minnesota, she grew up performing on stage with her sisters, carrying a natural charisma that drew audiences in. Hollywood noticed quickly. At just 13, she was signed to MGM, a dream for most, but the beginning of a lifelong struggle for her. Judy became a star overnight with The Wizard of Oz. Her performance as Dorothy, filled with warmth and longing, captured hearts around the world. But behind the scenes, the studio treated her not as a child, but as a product. They put her on strict diets, monitored her every move, and fed her pills to control her weight, her energy, her sleep, habits that would haunt her entire life. The girl the world adored was growing up inside a machine that cared only about the next film, the next appearance, the next perfect smile. Despite the pressure, Judy's talent was breathtaking. Her voice, powerful, aching, unforgettable, filled films like Meet Me in St. Louis and A Star is Born with emotional depth few performers could match. Off-screen, she was warm, witty, and heartbreakingly vulnerable. But the studio system had carved deep scars. She battled anxiety, exhaustion, and dependency, haunted by expectations she could never quite escape. Yet every time she walked on stage, she gave everything she had. And every time she sang, the world listened. As she entered adulthood, her personal life became increasingly unstable. Marriages faltered, finances crumbled, and the addiction fostered during her teenage years grew into a lifelong struggle. Still, she performed, on television, in concerts, in clubs. Her voice weathered, but still carrying that unmistakable magic. She wanted to be loved not as a legend, but as a person. It was a wish she rarely received. On June 22, 1969, Judy Garland passed away in London from an accidental overdose of barbiturates. She was just 47. The world mourned the loss of a woman whose spirit had been both luminous and fragile. Judy lived her life under lights too bright, carrying burdens too heavy, giving more than she ever received. Her legacy is bittersweet, a star whose brilliance inspired generations, but whose pain revealed the cost of a system that prizes perfection over humanity. Even today, when her voice rises in Somewhere Over the Rainbow, it feels like a message from a soul still searching for a place where she could finally rest. Number 14. Carolyn Jones. She was elegance wrapped in mystery. A woman whose presence on screen could shift from vulnerable to electric in a single breath. Born in Amarillo, Texas, Carolyn Jones spent much of her childhood battling severe asthma, confined to her home while her imagination wandered far beyond the walls around her. Movies became her escape, her inspiration, and eventually her destiny. When she finally stepped onto a Hollywood set, it was clear she possessed something rare, a quiet magnetism that drew the camera toward her. Carolyn rose quickly in the 1950s, earning roles alongside some of the era's biggest stars. Her performance in The Bachelor Party earned her an Academy Award nomination, proof that beneath her delicate features was a remarkable emotional depth. She brought sophistication to every role she played, whether she was portraying a mysterious femme fatale or a conflicted young woman searching for herself.
But it was a role in the 1960s that would immortalize her, Morticia Addams. As the iconic matriarch of the Addams family, Carolyn Jones became a pop culture legend. Her tall frame, soft voice, and hypnotic stare transformed Morticia into one of television's most unforgettable characters. Elegant, witty, and strangely enchanting. Audiences adored her. She brought humor and heart to a role that could have easily become a caricature, creating something timeless instead. Yet behind the performance was a woman facing struggles the public never saw. Her career slowed in the 1970s, not from lack of talent, but from health issues that quietly crept into her life. By the early 1980s, Carolyn was diagnosed with colon cancer. Still, she continued to work, starring in the TV series Capital, often filming through pain with determination that astonished those around her. She remained graceful, resilient, and fiercely committed to her craft until her body could no longer keep pace with her spirit. On August 3, 1983, Carolyn Jones passed away at the age of 53. Her death saddened fans who had grown up admiring her beauty, her talent, and the gentle charm she brought to every performance. Hollywood remembered her as a woman of immense poise, a chameleon who transformed effortlessly on screen while carrying quiet battles off it. Though her life ended far too soon, Carolyn Jones left behind a legacy richer than many twice her age. She remains the eternal Morticia, the elegant star who turned darkness into grace and humor into art. Number 15. Dorothy Stratton. Parte 15. She was the kind of beauty Hollywood notices instantly. Luminous, gentle, impossible to forget. Born in Vancouver, Dorothy Stratton grew up quiet and thoughtful, a girl who never imagined her life would soon be swept into the blinding rush of fame. When she was discovered at 18, her rise was meteoric. Within a year, she became Playboy's Playmate of the Year, a title that introduced her to the world and drew Hollywood's attention to her natural charm and surprising talent. Behind the photographs, Dorothy was far more than a pretty face. She was intelligent, curious, and determined to grow as an actress. Directors admired her humility, her professionalism, and the way she learned with remarkable speed. In films like Galaxina and They All Laughed, she displayed a warmth and sincerity that hinted at a promising future. Those who worked with her saw not a model-turned-actress, but a young woman on the edge of genuine stardom, someone who could have become one of the most beloved talents of her era. But Dorothy's life was shadowed by a toxic relationship she struggled to escape. Her husband, Paul Snider, controlled her career, clung to her success, and grew increasingly unstable as she gained independence. Friends urged her to step away, sensing danger that she tried to downplay. Dorothy wanted peace, kindness, and a future shaped by her own choices, not by fear. The closer she came to breaking free, the more the tension around her grew. On August 14, 1980, that danger exploded into tragedy. When Dorothy visited Snider's Los Angeles apartment to discuss separation, he turned violent. In a moment of rage and possession, he took her life before taking his own. Dorothy Stratton was only 20 years old. Her death stunned Hollywood with its brutality. A young woman full of grace and potential, stolen before the world truly knew her. Dorothy Stratton remains one of the most heartbreaking what could have been stories in Hollywood history. She left behind a legacy defined not by scandal, but by the light she carried, soft, radiant, and filled with promise. Even in her brief time under the spotlight, she touched countless lives and continues to be remembered as a symbol of innocence, beauty, and dreams cut far too short. If this story touched you, leave a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next dark journey through Hollywood's forgotten stars.